Hello and welcome to our next session. I'm Parvez Khan. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication, Cohort University of Science and Technology. The subject is Communication Research Methods. The course code is GMC 481. Our today's lecture is about methods of textual analysis. And today in textual analysis, we'll be focusing on semiotics. This is what we are going to talk about today. What is semiotics? How can we use it as a method of textual analysis? Why is it so important in communication studies and humanities and arts? So this is what is going to be a primary focus of today, and the objectives of our session are: students will be able to understand the basics of semiotics, like what semiotics is, the basic background, who the founders are, the big names of semiotics, what semioticians do, what do they look for. And then it will also help to enhance students' capacity to understand various ways in conducting qualitative research, and along with developing their qualitative research methodology, it will also help build insight in approaching media and cultural text through semiotics. So this is pretty much going to be the objective of our session today, that to give an insight into what semiotics is, to enhance their capacity to understand various ways in which the research can be done, and obviously why is it so relevant for media and cultural studies, and why is it important in today's context as well. So we are going to go and talk about semiotics. So what is semiotics? Basically, semiotics, which is also called semiology, is basically a study of signs and sign using behavior. Like, what is a sign? We're going to explain it in a bit, but it's a study of signs. Whatever sign you see, you can relate it to the study of semiotics. Then it's about looking at signs with context. So this is what we are going to talk about. And basically, it was Ferdinand de Saussure is a big name, and we can say that he is basically one of the founding fathers of this field of science, and basically the life of science within society. This is what he focused on. And uh, long before Ferdinand de Saussure, this word was also used by John Locke, which I've highlighted here. John Locke, a famous philosopher. And today it has emerged in the late 19th century and 20th century. It has emerged as an interdisciplinary field. And today, what we see is that the works of Saussure, an American philosopher, Charles Sanders Peirce, is commonly referred to as in this discipline. There are big names. After that, many scholars followed their way, and it became a wide interdisciplinary field which many scholars use for their research studies, finding out about visuals, text, etc. So this is what semiotics is: basically the study of signs and sign behavior, and looking for cultural context and how language plays an important, how signs play an important role. So this is what semiotics is. And it also looks into how signs and symbols are used to communicate and develop interpretations. So importantly, when you look at a cultural text, if you look at a symbol, if you look at anything that falls into a category of semiotics or a sign, basically semiotics look into signs and symbols, and how they're used to communicate, and how what kind of interpretations you can take from it. For example, if you see a symbol, what does it mean? What is it, the context of it? Does it show any sign of resistance, or volunteerism, or any sign of what you call a revolution? What does the sign indicate, or what is the context behind it? So this is what we're going to. So let's go into examples. I mean, I know it can be difficult for you to just think about it, but let's look at this example. Now, when you see this sign in the market shop, for example, if you see this sign open, which is there, but when you see open sign in a shop, what does it mean? What does it bring to your mind? Obviously, your mind knows that the shop is open and you can go inside. But what if this is not your language? What would it mean? It would mean nothing to you. So obviously, when you're looking at a sign, There are certain cultural codes that come to your mind, which makes you understand. So language is the key, but the concept is more important. Like for example, open never means open, but since the societies and the world and the linguists have given meaning to the word open, so that's why you understand that if this sign is somewhere, no matter where it is, it means that it's open. Similarly, the sound of fire brigade. Obviously, when you look at the sound of fire brigade, immediately you understand that there is going to be fire brigade or ambulance. You know that it's a sign of danger. They're running. They're going rushing somewhere. So you understand the context of it. For example, if you're driving and an ambulance is behind you, you immediately give way to them because you know that they're in emergency. They have to make the patient reach hospital in time and things like that. So if another example now we've talked about the visual one, we have talked about now the senses, the sound. Through sound you can even go to your imagination. The concept of fire brigade or the ambulance comes in your mind. But there's another sense as well when you look utilize your sense, which is smell. For example, if there's a smoke, you understand something is burning. That's a sign of danger. So obviously, uh, you haven't seen it written somewhere, but you understand what it is. So that is basically semiotics. And another example, if we go further into details about these things, like for example, uh, when you see a sign of smoke written, you can understand that outside there'll be something foggy, something smoky, something that is burning. Or if you see a sign of danger, obviously they ask you to stop. For example, when you're trespassing a place, they say dangerous area, don't trespass. It obviously comes to your mind that something dangerous is out there. So this, which is why it stops you. So this is what semiotics is. You see a word and it conceptualizes idea in your mind and you think about it. For example, if someone uses the word beautiful, your imagination, for example, if I say a word beautiful watch, and in your imagination a beautiful watch emerges. So that is basically how I'm working with signs. Now, look at the tree. Like tree can be a word which is TREE. A tree can be a picture of an original tree, a real tree. A tree can be even a diagram or a painting or anything. So whenever you see that, there is something at the back of your mind that tells you that yes, they're talking about a tree. But what if tree is not in your language? For example, we call tree dracht, and but I don't know what tree means in English. So that's where that's going to be a problem for me. Because each language, each culture has their own codes through which they identify things. So for conceptualizing ideas, it's important that you're aware of the cultural codes as well. But anyway, let's make it much more interesting. And let's move towards another one. So another example can be the meaning of ox. What is ox? Now, obviously, ox can be anything. I don't know. Let's, for example, I don't know what an ox is. So it can be anything. It can even be, let's suppose, let me show you the diagram now. It can be this, maybe this. This is an ox because we call this an ox. But what if I don't know what this ox is? And I take you to a game which is very popular, people usually play. Maybe this can be an OX game as well. So it depends in the context. It depends on your cultural codes, your mental capacity, which culture you've been living in, which kind of society you're living. So the moment you take a name and the context is there and you understand what it means. For example, there can be many words. Like for example, there may be no rabab in English music, but the moment I say rabab, people understand I'm talking about a cultural instrument and with a lot of historical context behind it. It's a sweet melody playing instrument, something like that. So a cultural context is important for words as well. So there are two main approaches when we talk about this semiotics. In semiotics, we use two main approaches. The first one is by Ferdinand de Saussure, and the second one is Charles Sanders Peirce. And these approaches are equally important because they tell us and explain to us how to approach the cultural text, written text, the words, the meanings behind it. So let me take you and explain this further much. What is a sign basically? I'm talking about signs, but it's important to talk about signifier and signified. These are very common words, and it has caused a lot of confusion in many scholars because sometimes young students they just don't understand what this means. But remember, when we talk about sign, sign is basically composed of signifier and signified. A sign can never be without these two things. Now, in order to elaborate and explain this, I need your little attention that once again, a sign is something which is composed, which compose sign is composed of signifier and signified. Now, this is a very important point. Now, let's move towards further explanation of this one. Let's just see. So yes, semiotics is concerned with signs and their relationship with objects and meaning. One way to view sign is to consider them composed of a signifier and signified. Now, simply put, now just understand this one. This is a key point. If you simply put it, signifier is the sound associated with or image of something. For example, a tree. When you see a word tree, signified is basically the mental concept of things. That is the idea of a tree. So when you see a word, that is a signifier. When you see a mental concept, that is a signified. Again, in very simple words, if you see a word called car, C-A-R, car, it means this is the signifier. Car is the signifier. What does it signify? When the mental concept of a car comes into your mind, that it is a car, it's a vehicle, it has gears, it has speedometer, that is the signified. So together they form a sign. Signifier and signified, when they combine, they form a sign. So simply, when you see a word, that is a signifier. When the mental concepts come to you, that is called signified. It's a tricky thing, but I've very simplified it for you. And then, when you state it differently, the sign is the relationship between the concept and the representation of that concept. Because you can see a concept, for example, car is a concept, and what does it represent? It represents a vehicle with four tires and all these things. That's the representation. So when you see a word and when you think about its representation, what does it represent? That is basically a signified. For example, there's a word called uh, before I talk about three types of sign, but let me give you another example. For example, there's a word called laptop. Now, laptop is signifier. What does it signify? It signifies a machine that operates, that uses internet, which you can use Microsoft Word on. You can be interconnected on social media platforms, but it's a machine capable of doing multitasking. So this concept of multitasking is basically signified. Now let's talk about three types of signs. The first one is iconic signs. Iconic signs, icons are basically signs where meanings are based on similarity of appearance. So, for example, a drawing of our tree, basically, it's a sign which is an iconic sign. Basically, it's similar to the real tree. For example, if you draw a picture of a laptop, and you can immediately guess that it's an iconic sign of a laptop. For example, if you draw mobile and it looks similar to the real mobile, that's the iconic sign. Then there is indexical signs. Basically, indexical signs have a cause and effect relationship to the sign. For example, and the meaning of the sign, there is a direct link between the two. So a leaf might be an indexical sign of a tree. Indexical signs have a cause and effect relationship between sign and the meaning. So it's a direct relationship. A leaf might be an indexical sign. And then the symbolic sign. These signs have an arbitrary or conventional link. For example, the word tree only comes because that's in our conventional language. And it can be arbor in German, it can be anything, it can be dracht in Urdu. So this symbolic sign, like for example, when you see a cross, you understand that it's a symbolic sign of Christianity. So these are the three things, for example, iconic signs, indexical signs, and symbolic signs. And then sign can be broken into two parts again. The first one, again, let me explain. The first one is the signifier, the other one is the signified. The signifier is the thing, item, or code that we read, which is like a drawing, a word, or a photo. And each signifier has a signified, that the idea being expressed by that signifier. Only they together do form a sign. I've discussed it again and again that a sign is composed of signifier and signified. For example, if I talk about mobile, there's a word mobile, and what comes to your mind is cell phone or anything that is your signified. And there's often an intrinsic direct relationship between sign and signifier. So uh, this is what is a direct relationship about. So language is flexible, constructed, and changeable. This is what Saussure says, that language is flexible, constructed, and changeable. Basically, he's telling us about the arbitrariness of the language, which means that language cannot be fixed. Meanings change over time. No meaning can be fixed. So if you're studying a particular phenomenon research, you must explain that you're studying this phenomena for the so and so period, which means that later on it can be changed. There are many words which can be changed over a period of time. Some words have positive connotation, some words have negative connotations over a period of time, and it can change over a period of time. A good example, let me give you here, is the word of cool. The word cool, it can be anything. What does a cool signify? For example, the word cool is a signifier. So, what should be its signified? For example, it can be something that it refers to a colder temperature, but in another one, it can be something stylish or popular. So the word cool can be used as something which connotates or explains something about temperature. For example, if I say, oh, what a cool weather, it means the weather is good enough. But it can, if I say, you look cool, it means it's you look stylish. So the word cool is a signifier. Its signified can be the temperature one, the cool with which refers to temperature, or something is stylish. So the relationship between signifier and signified can change over time and in different contexts. So always remember, the word you see can have multiple meanings. The word can be polysemic, which means more than one meaning. For example, uh, you can say that I hate waking up on Sundays, which means that you just don't like it. And if you say that I really hate people, that can have a different effect. So words can change with meanings and contexts. So according to Saussure, signs are purely psychological because what it does, sign evokes your psychology, it evokes your cultural codes, your schemata, things that you've learned over a period of time. So, for example, when you see a word or a symbol, you understand what it means, and it brings a lot of cultural context to it. For example, when you see a flag of Pakistan, you understand the star, the meaning of colors, everything behind it. Similarly, symbols work in the same way. So signs are purely psychological. Any word, for example, if I talk to you about the word cinema, it brings to you a large cultural context that it is a place where people go and watch films in theater. A large number of people sit together, a film is played, people watch it, they pass the reviews, they buy tickets, things like that. Now, just one word can bring a lot of imagination. Now, the imagination that comes to your mind is purely psychological. So, a word signifier can bring a lot of signified. Signified basically means your imagination, what comes to your mind, the mental concept of it. And then signs only make sense in a formal abstract system. Now, there needs to be a system. One word language is an impossibility. There cannot be a one word language. And basically, A sign refers to what it is not. For example, a tree is a word, but tree doesn't mean tree. It's something that people have given meaning to it. For example, a school, we call school for place of learning, but we can even call it academy if we want to. So meanings are given by us. Signs just tell you. For example, if there's a sign called stop, S-T-O-P, it doesn't mean, it can mean that you can still walk because, but people have conventionally given meaning to stop on a sign of stop. So that's what you do. You just stop there. So we come to know the world through language. Language is the key. The more we know about the language, the better we are. And that's why many cultural studies scholars, and particularly when reading Foucault, it's best to read him in the French language because, there's a lot of context in the language. That's why it's best to read originals in their own language. But unfortunately, sometimes you cannot read the original language. That can become a problem, but in general, our understanding of the world comes through language. Now, one example I'll give before I move on. For example, in our language, in Urdu language, we call snow as baraf, or we call ice or snow or place which are cold as snow. But there is in Eskimos, for Eskimos in their language, it can have 72 words for snow, which means that they interpret snow differently from us. They can say dry one, cold one, shallow one, hard one. That makes their world different from us because their understanding of the world is through their language. And we just have a simple word, the snow, that's it. So even language shapes our world. My point is that the world we see is often shaped by the word language we use. For example, there's a word called nang in Pashto. So, which means obviously in simple word it would be honor, but in our language it can have multiple meanings: respect and the honor and the respect and these kind of things can come to mind when we imagine such words. So words play an important role in shaping our world, and signs basically reflect the system they are found in. A relationship between the sign and signifier is not a matter of personal choice. You cannot just give meanings on your own. For example, if you see a car and you say, "Oh no, this is a tonga," although this is an elephant. This cannot happen. By looking at car, you cannot just simply say that, "Look, this is an elephant." No one will agree to you because there are conventions. Language has been put in there for some reason. You cannot just make out things of your own. That's my point. The relationship between the sign and signifier is not a matter of personal choice. It can never happen that you read a word and you have a different mental capacity for it because you are part of this culture, you are a product of this culture and society. You cannot just go outside it. And one thing to remember, that sign is arbitrary and it knows no other law other than tradition. So all the meanings are based on basically traditions which have been set over a long period of time. My point here is that the meanings given are temporary, but it comes with a strong tradition. That's why it's hard to change them immediately. It's hard to change them suddenly. So, once again, I would like to give examples because I've spoken a lot, but I want to give an example of this again. Now, look at this picture. This is an apple. Yes, you can see what is the signifier. Basically, signifier is the physical existence of the sound and word or image. And it reflects about, it's like when you think about the apple physically, it's a red, it has a leaf, it is round, it looks like an apple. But what is the mental concept of the apple? Yes, it's an apple, but it reflects freshness, it reflects healthiness, temptation, and obviously, an apple a day keeps a doctor away. The famous quote that we always hear since childhood reflects that it's a healthy thing. That's the mental concept, which is the signified. So once again, I'm explaining. A sign is an apple. It has a signifier, which is the image of it, like it's red. It has a leaf. It's apple, and it has a mental concept, which means it's healthy. That's the signified. Now again, there are three examples. You can see a red rose. The signifier of a red rose with a green stem, that's the signifier. Obviously, we can see that. Now, what does a red rose signify? It's a symbol of passion and love. This is what the rose represents. The first one on the top, you can see. Then you can see the second one is a symbol of cross. It's a brown cross, simple as that. But what does it signify? It's a symbol of religion, or to be more specific, it's a symbol of Christianity. And then we have a heart, obviously. It's a red heart that you can see, but it's a symbol of love and affection. So, this is how you understand signs and signifier. Very simple, very, very easy, and very, very interesting for you. The reason I'm giving these examples is that you can understand for a long period of time that when you see a word, it is basically a signifier. And when the mental concept comes to your mind, that's basically signified. Now, another example. Now, the signifier here is the red light. Now, when you see a red light, what does it signify? That you cannot continue to drive your car. So, immediately in your mind, the signified is telling you that you cannot drive because it's red. It's dangerous. And this whole sign together will tell you that it's dangerous to continue. You have to stop. Simple as that, and a very, very interesting example. And then we have a signified and signifier in the shape of dog. When you read the word dog, that is signifier. But when a mental concept of a dog comes to your mind, that is signified, and together they form a sign. I hope that by now, by giving so many examples, you're clear that sign consists of signifier and signified. Here, the signifier is dog, and signified is the mental concept of dog. And and now let's take this concept further. Why I'm discussing this in greater detail is that it has a lot to do in the field of communications and film studies and media studies and all those texts that you see in productions, film production, cultural productions. You can use semiotics to a greater deal. That's why in visual studies, semiotics has been very popular in the last from the 1980s onwards. It gained a lot of popularity along with other kind of discourse studies and basically critical discourse studies. But semiotics was particularly focusing more on visuals. But now there is multimodal discourse analysis, which is also equally popular. But every methodology has its pros and some shortcomings as well. But we'll talk about that some other day. But today, I'm going to tell you that signifier and signified in camera movement is one example that you can see. Like for example, even if you move camera, for example, when you move camera pan down, for example, if you are uh, filming someone and you take camera above his eye level, basically, for example, if you are looking at someone and is taller than the camera, basically you're showing his power and authority, which we usually do to heroes or even apart from villains as well. Sometimes we show that I'm powerful and strong. The camera angle is kept at low, and then the camera angle when you just take the camera up and if you make them look smaller, they look weaker, and that's obviously cut in and cut out. And basically the point of this slide is to tell you that the way you picturize a film also shows authority, position of weakness, focus, and the camera angles has a lot to play. So whatever you do through camera movements, it initiates a mental concept. And one example is that if you place a camera lower than a person, if he is looking down upon the camera, that character looks stronger. And if you take the camera upwards and the man is looking towards the camera upwards, he would look weaker. So that signifies, and that's how in filmmaking, even you have to look at scenes where the hero is being shown powerful or the villain is being shown as a weaker one, and what does these words they're saying, what does it signify? Does it promote any kind of racism or anything? These are the kind of things that you can see through semiotics as well. So, before we conclude, let's talk about advantages that semiotics allow us to break down a message into its components and examine them separately and in relationship to one another. Basically, it gives you an idea, it breaks into the components, it gives you a better idea of what it is, and it gives you a better idea for patterns, different forms of communication. And basically why I like semiotics more, because it gives us a cultural and social conventions which we can relate to. And the last one, obviously, is that it helps us to get beyond the obvious, which may not be obvious after all. because there's a lot of context behind the words we say, the visuals, there's a lot of context behind the symbols, the words. For example, showing any ethnic tribe as backward may have consequences for them in real life. So, how people are depicted on screen, what kind of representation is taking place for their community, it matters a lot. So, when you look into that through semiotics, it gives you a better idea that things are not that simple. Racism is often often takes place through such representation. So it's important to look into that context as well. So the questions that you can see, that how can we use semiotics? How can it help us in understanding cultural texts? And then obviously its role in visual and communication studies. So this is pretty much our discussion for today. I hope that you enjoyed the session. It was a pretty detailed one on semiotics. We talk more about it. We'll even discuss. I've shared an article with you. It's a very good article on semiotics, and I'm waiting for your reviews as well. So let's see and talk about it more in the coming days. And these are the references that we've used. So thank you very much, and have a great day.